for 11 days when his brother slid a folder across the kitchen table and told me it was just paperwork.
That was the first lie.
The second was the room they gave me.
Harold Bennett called it the back room, like that made it sound temporary. Ruth, my mother-in-law, said it was private. Cole said I should be grateful, because not every widow got a roof after Flowers died.
So I said thank you.
I said thank you while my 6-year-old son, Eli, slept on a mattress beside a wall that smelled like old rain. I said thank you while I folded Daniel's work shirts into a cardboard box. I said thank you while Cole tapped the folder and said the farm was in trouble, the debts were real, and the family needed everyone to cooperate.
Everyone meant me.
The papers had words I did not understand yet. Surviving spouse, release of claim, minor child interest. Cole explained them like a grocery list. If I trusted the Bennetts, I would sign. If I loved Daniel, I would not make things harder for his parents. If I cared about Eli, I would help save the farm his father grew up on.
That was how they did it. They wrapped pressure in grief and handed it to me like a casserole.
I wanted to keep peace. Daniel had died in a construction accident, and some mornings I still reached across the bed before remembering there was no bed, no apartment, no husband breathing beside me. There was only the Bennett farmhouse, a room that was not ours, and a family reminding me I was there for now.
But then Eli started coughing at night.
At first I blamed the cold, then I blamed the dust. Then one evening, while he slept in Daniel's old hoodie, I pressed my hand against the well beside his mattress and felt damp wood under the paint. The moisture was coming from the pantry. When I told Ruth I could pull the old shelves down and check for mold, her face changed. Not anger exactly, fear.
"Don't touch that wall," she said.
I asked why.
She looked toward the hallway, where Harold and Cole were talking about parcel maps, buyers, and how quickly I could be made to sign. "Some things are better left alone," she said.
Maybe I should have listened. A woman with savings and another place to sleep might have packed a bag and left. But I had $73, a child with a cough, and a folder that could decide whether Eli had anything left of his father, besides a last name.
So the next morning, while the house was empty, I put on work gloves and moved canned peaches, flour sacks, and rusted cake pans off the pantry shelves. Behind the lowest shelf, I found a strip of wood that did not match the wall. Behind that was a seam. And behind the seam was a small door painted over and nailed shut.
I opened it because my son had been sleeping beside mold. What I found was not money. It was not a safe. It was not a miracle that fixed my life in one afternoon. It was a nursery.
A crib under a yellowed sheet, faded duck wallpaper, a rocking chair with one broken runner, and on the far wall, written in pale blue paint, one name.
Anna. That was the moment I realized the Bennett family had not only been asking me to sign away land. They had been teaching me how people disappear. The first week in the Bennett farmhouse taught me the difference between being welcomed and being allowed. Harold never said I was a burden. He was too careful for that. He carried 2 boxes from my car, set them inside the back room, and told Eli there were chickens behind the barn. Ruth made soup and left towels on the mattress. Cole brought in a small television and said, "For the kid." From the outside, it probably looked generous. From the inside, every kindness had a border. The upstairs bedroom that used to be Daniel's was too painful for Ruth to open. The guest room was full of tax files. The room off the pantry was the only space that made sense. Nobody ordered you. They explained until saying no made you sound unreasonable. So Eli and I slept downstairs. At night, I could hear pipes click in the walls. Eli curled up in Daniel's faded Iowa State sweatshirt, the one that still smelled like sawdust. He asked me if Grandpa Harold liked him. "Of course he does," I said. I wanted it to be true. Harold was not cruel to Eli. That would have been easier to name. He just corrected him constantly. "Don't hold the bucket like that. Don't leave the gate half-latched. Don't run near the tools. Don't cry over a scraped hand." Eli started watching Harold's face before he moved, the way children do when they are trying to predict the weather inside an adult. Ruth noticed. She slipped Eli extra biscuits when Harold wasn't looking, but she never contradicted her husband, not once. Cole was the one who talked the most. He came by every morning, leaning against the counter with coffee he never finished, explaining the farm's problems like I had caused them by becoming a widow. Feed costs were up.
the equipment loan was behind. Daniel's accident had frozen everything. There was a buyer interested in the south parcel, but the paperwork needed to be clean.
He always said clean. Clean title, clean transfer, clean agreement. I had been a nursing assistant, not a lawyer. I knew how to lift a patient without hurting their back, change wound dressings, and work 12 hours on my feet. I did not know what a release of claim meant, or why Cole kept saying it would protect everyone. When I asked if I could have someone look at the papers, he smiled like I had disappointed him.
Sure, he said, but don't let strangers make this ugly. Daniel hated ugly.
That sentence stayed with me.
Because Daniel had hated conflict, yes, but he had also hated this house in a way he never explained. He would visit his parents for Sunday dinner and leave before dessert. After Eli was born, he stopped bringing us overnight. He said the crib at our apartment was better. He said the drive home helped him sleep.
I believed him then. On the 5th night, Eli asked where his dad had slept when he was little. Ruth dropped her spoon into her bowl. Harold wiped his mouth and said, "Upstairs."
Just one word.
Cole changed the subject to the south parcel.
Later, I saw Ruth standing by the pantry door, staring at the wall behind the old shelves. Her hand was pressed flat against her chest, like holding something in.
When she noticed me watching, she smiled too quickly.
"Leave the dishes," she said. "You've had enough for one day."
But in the Bennett house, enough was never really enough.
It was what they called silence before asking for more. By the 2nd week, I stopped calling things awkward and started calling them what they were.
Patterns.
Cole did not ask about the papers when Harold was outside or Ruth was in the laundry room. He asked when Eli was within earshot, when my son was coloring at the kitchen table or eating toast with both hands. Cole would lower his voice just enough to sound kind and say, "Your mom and I are trying to keep the farm safe."
Not the family. The farm.
Then he would glance at me like I was the one making Eli unsafe by not signing.
The first pattern was how often Daniel's name became a tool. If I hesitated, Cole brought him up. Daniel would have understood. Daniel would have wanted this settled. Daniel always knew the land came first.
But the Daniel I knew had kept his work boots by our apartment door, not his parents' mudroom. He had mailed his paychecks to our account, not the farm account. And once, when Eli was a newborn and Harold offered to raise him right during planting season, Daniel drove us home in the dark without saying a word for 20 miles. At the time, I thought he was tired. Now I wondered what he had been protecting us from.
The second pattern was Ruth's silence. She was gentle in ways that almost made me trust her. She warmed Eli's milk before bed. She folded Daniel's shirts when she thought I was asleep. She left cough drops on the crate beside our mattress after Eli started wheezing at night.
But whenever Cole mentioned signing, she became still, not approving, not objecting, just still, like a woman who had survived by learning where not to stand. One afternoon, while I was rinsing dishes, I asked her if Daniel had ever talked about leaving the farm for good. Her hand tightened around a plate. "Daniel loved his family," she said. That wasn't what I asked. She dried the plate until it squeaked. Sometimes love means not making things harder. That was the third pattern. In this house, love always seemed to mean swallowing something. I began writing things down after Eli asked me if we could be kicked out before Christmas. He said it quietly, under his blanket, his face half hidden in Daniel's sweatshirt. "Who told you that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Uncle Cole said grown-ups have to cooperate if they want everybody to stay okay." I sat on the floor beside him and felt something inside me go cold and clear.
The next morning, I took the folder to the public library and copied every page. I wrote dates in a notebook: Daniel's accident, the funeral, the day Harold said we could stay, for now, the day Cole gave me the release, the first night Eli coughed, the day Ruth told me not to touch the pantry wall.
I did not know yet what any of it proved. I only knew it was not nothing. When Cole saw the library receipt in my coat pocket, his face changed. "You don't trust us?" he asked. "I'm trying to understand what you gave me."
"It's family paperwork, Mara."
"Then family can wait until I understand it." He looked at me for a long second, and for the first time the kindness dropped out of his voice.
"You know, Dad doesn't have to let you stay here."
There it was.
Not said in anger, not shouted, almost casual. But it landed harder than any threat he could have made. That night, Eli coughed until he cried. I moved his mattress away from the damp wall, and when I pressed my palm against the paint, it gave slightly under my fingers. The pantry was not just old. It was hiding rot. And I was starting to think the whole house was. I waited until the house was empty before I touched the pantry wall. Harold had taken Eli to see the calves. Ruth had gone into town for prescriptions. Cole was meeting the buyer for the south parcel, which meant I had maybe 2 hours before someone came back and told me I was doing something wrong. I put on gloves, opened the window, and started with the bottom shelf.
The wood was soft near the floor, soft enough that my scraper sank into it. I pulled away one strip, then another, and found a narrow line where the wall did not quite meet itself. At first, I thought it was old paneling. Then I saw the hinge, painted into the frame.
My hands started shaking.
Not because I thought I had found anything valuable. I was past believing life worked that way. I was shaking because Ruth had known this was here. Daniel had probably known something was here too.
I pried the first nail loose, then the second. The little door opened with a sound like breath through teeth. Behind it was a room.
Small, narrow, and stale with trapped air. Dust floated through the flashlight beam. A crib sat against the far wall under a yellowed sheet. Duck wallpaper curled at the corners. A rocking chair leaned to one side. Above it, painted in faded blue letters, was one name.
Anna. I stood there listening to my own heartbeat. There was no safe, no stack of cash, no single piece of proof that could solve the papers on the kitchen table. Just a child's room sealed away so completely that the house had learned to pretend it was a pantry wall. I took photos before I moved anything.
Not to expose them, not to punish Ruth. I took them because I had learned something in the last 2 weeks. If I did not make a record, someone else would explain my life for me.
I photographed the mold near Eli's wall, the hidden door, the nursery as I found it. Then I picked up the baby book from the crib and read the name on the first page. Anna Grace Bennett. Born March 14. The entries stopped after 5 months. When Ruth came home and saw the open wall, she dropped her pharmacy bag. Pill bottles rolled across the pantry floor. "You shouldn't have opened that," she whispered. "My son was sleeping beside mold," I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. "I opened a wall, Ruth. I didn't open this family's pain. It was already leaking into Eli's room." She covered her mouth and looked past me at the crib.
I wanted to ask everything at once. Who was Anna? Did Daniel know? Why had no one said her name? But Cole's folder was still on my bed. Eli's future was still sitting inside legal words I did not understand.
So I did not turn the nursery into a weapon. I wrapped the baby book in a towel and set it on the pantry table. Then I called the legal aid number again and asked for cancellations. That afternoon, I sat across from a lawyer named Miss Alvarez. I showed her copies, not originals. The release, my timeline, photos of the mold, and notes about Cole's comments. She read quietly, then said, "Do not sign this as written." It was not a victory. It was not justice. It was one clear sentence. But after weeks of being told trust was the same as obedience, one clear sentence felt like a door opening. Ms. Alvarez did not fix my life in one meeting. She did not promise me the farm. She did not call Cole a criminal. She did not say a judge would punish anyone by Friday. What she gave me was smaller and more useful than that. She gave me language. The next morning, I handed Cole a letter across the same kitchen table where he had first pushed the folder toward me. "I'm not refusing to cooperate," I said. "I'm refusing to sign anything until Daniel's estate, Eli's minor interest, and the proposed land sale are reviewed by someone neutral." Cole read the letter twice. Harold stood by the sink with his arms crossed. Ruth sat at the table, looking older than she had the day before. "You went to a lawyer," Cole said. I asked for help understanding paperwork. His jaw tightened. "You're making this ugly." "No," I said, "I'm making it clear." That was the first time I heard my own voice and believed it. The house changed after that. Cole stopped pretending his visits were casual. Harold spoke to me only when Eli was in the room. Ruth left food outside our door instead of coming in. Nobody threw us out, but the threat lived in the walls. I started calling rental offices during Eli's school hours. I called my old supervisor at the assisted living facility and asked for part-time shifts. I packed Daniel's shirts into one box and labeled it in black marker.
Not because I was leaving that day.
Because I wanted to remember that I could. The meeting happened 3 weeks later in a small office above the county bank. No courtroom, no dramatic confession. Just a table, bad coffee, 2 attorneys, and a stack of papers everyone suddenly had to read carefully. The release Cole had wanted me to sign was too broad. It would have limited future claims connected to Daniel's share of the farm and left Eli's interest unclear. The south parcel could still be sold, but not by pretending Daniel had never had a wife or child. Cole did not apologize. He argued about debt, timing, and how outsiders did not understand family land. Harold said almost nothing until the end. Then Miss Alvarez asked, "Do you want your grandson protected in this agreement?" Harold looked at Eli's birth certificate on the table. For a long time, he did not answer. Finally, he said, "Yes." It was not warm. It was not enough to erase anything, but it was the first honest word I had heard from him. The final agreement took another month. The family sold a smaller piece of land than Cole wanted. A modest trust was created for Eli from Daniel's share. I signed a narrower document after Ms. Alvarez reviewed every line. I had 90 days to move out, not because they were pushing me into the road, but because I had chosen not to live under a roof where gratitude was used like a leash. Before we left, Ruth asked me to come to the pantry.
The little nursery door was open. The crib had been dusted. On the rocking chair sat the family Bible, turned to a page where Ruth had written one name back in.
Anna Grace Bennett.
Harold stood in the hallway, not entering, not leaving. He looked at the painted name on the wall and whispered it once.
Anna. No one hugged. Cole did not soften. Nothing became simple. But something had been named. 2 weeks later, Eli slept in a small bedroom with a real window in a rental near his school. I sat at our secondhand kitchen table with Daniel's box beside me and the reviewed agreement in a folder on the shelf. For years, I thought peace meant staying quiet enough to be allowed in the room. Now I know better. Sometimes peace begins when you open the door everyone told you not to touch and ask what it has been costing the children to keep it closed.